Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. A complete mockery, a parody of justice. Saudi Arabia is under fire for recently commuting the sentences of those convicted of murdering journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The UN's human rights investigator blasted the Saudi decision, saying it carried no legal or moral legitimacy. The entire trial was widely criticized by rights groups as a sham, noting no senior officials nor anyone suspected of ordering the killing was found guilty. That's despite mounting evidence that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was directly involved. Jamal Khashoggi was a prominent Saudi dissident who was living in the United States. In October of 2018, he mysteriously vanished after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. After uncovering overwhelming evidence, it was determined that Khashoggi had been brutally murdered and his body disposed of by a Saudi hit squad. Back in July, Turkey put 20 Saudi suspects on trial in absentia and has demanded that Saudi authorities cooperate with the investigation. And joining me from London is Azzam Tamimi. He is the chairman of Al-Hiwar TV channel. And joining from Singapore, James Dorsey, who is a senior fellow focused on the Middle East at Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So Saudi Arabia is facing an international criticism for commuting the sentences of those who were convicted of 2018 murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Azzam, has justice been served?
Well, definitely not. And I think the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia believes, probably correctly, that he can get away with the crime he ordered to be committed or perpetrated in Istanbul. And that's why he's organized a sham trial, and nobody knows whether even anybody has been imprisoned or not. So we really don't know the only thing we know is that he ordered the killing, and the team of murderers who carried out his orders have not been brought before justice.
Yeah. So the Saudis, James, have been criticized for a lack of transparency during the whole trial. The defendants were not named, and it was closed to public. What do you make of this so-called independent investigation into the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and how do you think the process was handled from the very beginning?
Well, I think that the issue of criticism that we're seeing right now is not the conversion, but it's exactly what you mentioned: the total lack of transparency, the total lack of due process of law that we're seeing. Therefore, as you know, we don't know who these people are. They were never identified. We don't know what the precise charges were against them. We don't know what the evidence was against them. We don't know what evidence there is in terms for definitively identifying who gave the order for this, nor do we know what emerged in the trial itself of what actually happened inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. That's what the criticism is focused on. The conversion is just one more element of this.
So what kind of an impact will this ruling have on the MBS's rule and the kingdom's future, Azzam? And will there be any ramifications for the kingdom, or its role in the global economy is too important?
I think so long as Trump is in power in Washington, the Saudis will not bother about any criticism leveled at them. Yes, the reputation of Saudi Arabia is suffering, that is true. Yes, some of the men named in this crime will probably not be able to travel freely to many parts of the world, but I don't think they are bothered about this. However, if a new president is elected in the United States of America next November, probably we will see things changing, because the media in America, civil society, Congress, many influential circles are very unhappy with what Mohammed bin Salman has been doing.
So will the Crown Prince lose his #1 supporter in Washington, James? Because in Bob Woodward's upcoming book, Trump reportedly boasted about protecting MBS from a congressional scrutiny. Will a Biden administration will be less friendly?
Well, I think that a Biden administration certainly will have a very different policy, but we'll have to wait and see how far that goes. With other words, the Trump administration has had no regard for the defense of human rights, whether in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else. The Biden administration will pay more lip service to that. But of course, what the foremost objectives of the Biden administration are going to be threefold. One is rolling back some of the anti-democratic measures that Biden has taken. Two is repairing the economy, which is going to involve rebuilding relations with allies, and part of that could be looking the other way on issues like human rights. Having said that, there will be a much more critical sentiment towards Saudi Arabia than you see right now with Trump in the White House.
In early 2020, Saudi Arabia bought billions of dollars worth shares of U.S. companies, including Facebook, Walt Disney, Carnival, and Live Nation, and Amazon, whose CEO, Jeff Bezos, he just opened a shopping site in the country. So, Azzam, does this show that the Saudis aren't being held accountable and that the U.S. companies are being complicit in it?
Well, the U.S. companies, like companies across the world, especially in the Western hemisphere, they only care about making more money, generating more profit. And Saudi Arabia is like a gold rush for them. We saw this even after Mohammed bin Salman was implicated in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, when some of them went and attended a conference he invited them to. So they were not really bothered at all.
On the other hand, we know that US, Canada, France, and UK levied sanctions against 18 Saudis linked to the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, but MBS, of course, wasn't among them. Other European countries just canceled armed deals. So will the international community let that go, James?
Well, I think that you are going to see, certainly if a Biden administration comes to office, a greater scrutiny of arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Now, having said that, there's going to be a lot of lobbying in terms of the Gulf states, particularly because of relations with Israel. The other thing I think that you need to note, and I want to take issue with something that my colleague Azzam said, I don't think it's just Western companies that don't carry human rights first and foremost on their agenda. Neither do Chinese, Russian, or anybody else. Having said that, if you look at the degree of foreign direct investment in Saudi Arabia, there's been really very little bricks and mortar investment by Western companies in the kingdom since the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. There's been financial investment, there's been a lot of services, but there hasn't really been a lot of bricks and mortar. And we'll have to see if that would change.
So, Azzam, what kind of a role did Turkey play in revealing the cover-ups into the murder, and how has that impacted the two-country relations? Has Ankara fallen out with Riyadh? What's your take on that?
Well, what Turkey did was really important. It was vital. Without coming out clean and telling the world what they knew about the crime, probably it would have been simply covered up and forgotten. I mean, had this crime happened in another country where there is no interest in justice, even in the country's own sovereignty, probably there would have been a cover-up. And we know from the information we have that the Saudis tried to buy the Turks. They offered Erdogan a bribe so as to just forget about it and don't mention it, as if to say. But the Turks insisted that they would not participate in that crime.
Yeah, Turkey also says the verdict fell short of meeting the expectations of Turkey and the international community. So, James, Turkey has called on the Saudis to cooperate for the ongoing process. Is this possible?
Well, clearly the Saudis are not going to cooperate. What is clear from all of this process is that they've had the option of transparency all along. They have not exercised that option at any given moment, and they have tried to basically do the minimal to try and be seen as cooperating or being transparent and having a credible judicial process, and they've totally failed in that. There's no reason to believe why they would now suddenly turn around and want to cooperate. That would actually require that they give insight into the way these decisions are taken, who takes these decisions, how they're taken, who they're carried out by, and that's not something that the kingdom would want.
So is it, Azzam, up to the next U.S. president whether MBS will be held accountable or not?
Well, partly, of course, but definitely there is a lot to be expected from Saudi Arabia itself, from the Saudi public. I mean, until when will the people of Saudi Arabia remain indifferent or at least remain silent when they see their de facto ruler acting like a gangster here and there? Yes, a change in America is going to be helpful. That will also even embolden the European position, because generally European policy is impacted upon by the US policy or by US preferences. But eventually a real change will have to come from within Saudi Arabia itself.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. I appreciate it a lot. With millions stuck at home during this pandemic and with little to do, it's no surprise that people are turning to any form of entertainment. Mobile games are proving widely popular, especially among young people. And one Turkish company has cashed in on the craze after the gaming startup Peak was bought by tech giant Zyngas for $1.6 billion. So how deep does Turkey's mobile gaming industry go? Haydar Abbasi has this report.
The pandemic has been a disaster for business. From retail to oil, every industry has suffered. Well, almost. One of the few exceptions is gaming. With more time to kill because of self-isolation and lockdown orders, people are finding comfort in their consoles. Here in Turkey, online gaming is thriving, not only among players, but also for developers.
The entrepreneurship is becoming more and more popular. In Turkey, we have seen companies like Gram, Peak, and Rolik recently. All three of those have been sold to Zyngas for like very good numbers. And I can see like more and more investment is like coming to Turkey, especially after like success stories.
And while the economy is feeling pressure from the pandemic, the gaming industry is raking in serious money. 5 years ago, foreign exports of online games were worth $400 million. But the Game Developers Association of Turkey says the figure will climb to more than $1.5 billion this year, nearly quadrupling sales. In a sign that Turkish developers are competing with the best in the industry, several companies have been snapped up recently. In June, American mobile gaming giant Zynga bought the Turkish firm Peak for a massive $1.8 billion, its biggest acquisition to date. A few months later, Zynga added another Turkish developer, Rolik, to its stable for $168 million. So why is the country's gaming industry booming? Analysts say one of the reasons is the young population. Almost half of Turkey's 83 million people are under the age of 30, and more young Turks are choosing to work in digital-related industries. There's also support from the government. In the past 10 years, Ankara has handed out grants and tax breaks to startups worth $50 million.
We will very likely to see much more success stories coming out of Turkey. So I'm very positive about the future of the Turkish gaming industry, and I can see that it creates a very high output for as an economic value to the country.
Other advantages are that Turkey has 500 independent game development studios and 30 million active gamers. A strong domestic market has helped Turkey's gaming industry expand globally. In the coming years, it's expected to grow even more and advance to the next level. Haider Abbasi, Straight Talk.
And joining me now on set is Ozgur Karayalçın. He is the Business Development Director at VLMedia, a Turkish software company focusing on developing mobile apps and games. And Hendrik Lesser, who is the CEO of the Munich-based international production house, Remote Control Productions, and the president of the European Games Developer Federation. So, gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Hendrik, let me begin with you. How significant was Zyngas' purchase of Turkish game developer Peak for $1.8 billion?
I think especially for the Turkish games community, it was the most significant moment in its history. There has been, of course, other example of success, but this is by far the biggest yet. And as far as I know, also in regards to exit, so it's an economic impact on the region. And I hope it's like a lighthouse for the region, that games is not just a pastime for kids, but can be serious business. And for Zynga itself, you know, to spend 1.8 billion is not something you do out of fun. So they have, of course, proper reasoning behind it, and they believe in the future of Peak Games as part of the family of Zynga. So I think it's very significant for Turkey, for the Turkish community, but also even for Europe, because, you know, 1.8 billion as an exit is very big.
And very inspiring, I suppose. So, Ozgur, how will this sale affect Turkish mobile gaming sector? Are there more to follow suit?
Well, I guess yes. Turkey is now a shining star of the world in the game industry. So I'm sure in 2020 and 2021, it will continue. The exits will continue. We have few companies which are very valuable.
So, in your opinion, Hendrik, where does the Turkish game industry stand when it's compared to other countries, let's say the United States, China, or Poland?
You chose good examples. So, of course, the US is a traditional gaming market. It's very established, it's very mature. A lot of companies are actually in the US. You said and mentioned China. China is obviously an emerging market since 10 years. It's quite impressive how fast they were picking up. Poland is an interesting one within Europe because they are around in the gaming industry for a long time, and especially with the likes of CD Projekt, a couple of other companies being listed at the stock market in Poland. Poland is a significant player in Europe. And where does Turkey come in? You know, 20 years ago, I would say Turkey in regards to the games industry wasn't really on the map. And then you have projects like Mountain Blade coming from Turkey, which when they started was more kind of a, let's say, obscure phenomenon, which of course now is very established. But the mobile games industry in Turkey has been brewing for a couple of years. And with this lighthouse event, I think really showed what they can do. So the future is bright. And I believe that there's going to be many more investors investing into the market in Turkey, but also in Turkish companies trying to conquer the world, so to say. So I think that's a great sign.
So Turkish game industry, Ozgur, generated huge profits with, let's say, modest costs, small workplaces with few people. But when we look at the big players, we see investment costs increase a lot. So do you believe that the Turkish producers aim to focus on more or bigger productions to become more successful in the global arena?
Well, actually, when we look at the market size, it's I think it exceeds 160 billion US dollars, and more than half of it belongs to mobile market. So, and Turkey's game industry, I think 90%, more than 90% produces mobile games. So when we check personal computers games and console games, it's really challenging to produce a game. It takes more than 1 year, sometimes 2 or 3 years to produce a game. And plus, you need to have more than 100 employees. So it means money. And to start with the PC games, it's not so smart. So our companies prefer mobile games because it's easy to develop. Let's check hyper-casual games. Hyper-casual games, actually, they are very simple games. You play just one finger and in a short period of time. For example, when you are going to school with a bus, you just play a hyper-casual game.
Yes.
That's why billions of people play this. So Turkish companies prefer this market because we can produce one game in a 1 week.
Yes.
And we can test it.
So I understand Turkish companies prefer mobile games, but Hendrik, what is the global trend in gaming sector? Do people prefer mobile games over computers or consoles?
I would say prefer over. What we can see is obviously that the market still on mobile is growing, so this is suggesting that. But in the end, people are using multiple platforms, and that's what we see, for example, in China, which has been very mobile, online dominant for like, as I said, 10 years. And in recent years, they do exactly that. They start to make PC games and premium games and so on, because games is a business, but games are also cultural expression. So people want to also create other experiences, other stories and so on. And in mobile games, you have a certain limit on what you can do. So the more mature the market is, the more diverse it's going to be. And that's also true for the audience. They not just want to play on the bus, but they also want to play at home on a big screen, on their PlayStation, on their PC.
Yes. So how has COVID-19 impacted the game industry? And do you expect a significant decline in demand once this pandemic is over?
The pandemic definitely increased basically attention for established games a lot. So it's like if your friend's already playing a game, you were joining them in the game. So the big ones grew up to 300%, so it's really significant. I don't think this will stay on that level when the pandemic is over. Let's hope sooner than later. But I don't think it's going back to the levels of the past, because gaming was, of course, still growing the last years, and I don't see why it shouldn't grow in the future anymore. So I believe that in the end, it might have a little dip, but mid and long-term perspective is still on growth.
Yeah, so Ozgur, a common trend in Turkey's tech sector is newly set up companies seem to have, let's say, short-term monetary goals. They just want to grow to a certain point, and then they just sell themselves to a bigger company, a foreign company. Tell us, could something be done to encourage those countries to resist in a way to this temptation? Are there, for example, any government incentives?
Well, actually, I don't think that they are waiting for a certain point, because when you check the exits, it changed from $100 million to $1.8 billion. So each startup has its own growth story. And I think this is a natural progress for our industry, for our ecosystem, because it has just started in 2000s, and after 2010, our companies have been starting to grow very fast.
But for example, Rolex Games, founded just 21 months ago on a humble budget, as we say, was sold to U.S. giant for $168 million. Is it just its story? Can we just explain it like that?
But of course, I know their story. They had some goals and they reached. But I think we need some more time for our ecosystem. When it gets much more bigger, I'm sure that our companies then will start acquire foreign companies. But we need some time. So the co-founders are learning, and we are learning day by day. I think we will, but it's a natural progress for our story.
So, Hendrik, Europe is an aging continent. How are these games playing out for the elderly people? Are they also interested in these new age games?
Yes, they are. And when the Wii came out, which is already, I think, 8-9 years ago, we came up with a term called silver gamer, and that describes the elderly playing games. So what's obvious is that if you haven't played games before as an elderly person, it's very tough to understand, the controls, the mechanics, and so on. So they have to be games which are also made for that target audience. But for example, also my company is doing all kinds of non-entertainment games, meaning we make games for people who have certain sicknesses to be reminded to take their medicine and so on. So it's important to understand that games are not just entertainment. Games are a culture technique which you can use for all kinds of different purposes. So yes, also the elderly play, and in my opinion, basically everybody's gonna play. And today, especially if you go to the younger and the mid-age groups, it's more or less everybody.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much, Ozgur, for being with me on set. And Hendrik, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it a lot. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.